Imagine you're back in high school. Currently, you're sitting in your high school English class reading How to Kill a Mockingbird when over the intercom you hear Code Blue. This means active shooter drill. You and the rest of your classmates get up from your desks and move to the corner of the room that is not visible from the door. As you're doing this, your teacher gets up, locks the door, and turns off the lights. Then, your classmate Jarrett makes a joke about how this drill is stupid. Your teacher scolds him or reminds him this drill is in place in case of a real emergency. You think to yourself, if there were an active shooter in the school, what would hiding in the corner of the room do to defend us? Today, I would like to inform you about the importance of school safety by remembering the tragic shooting that took place on April 20th, 1999 at Columbine High School. Let's begin by looking at the psychological issues both boys presented prior to the shooting. The two gunmen were 17-year-old Dylan Klebold and 18-year-old Eric Harris. Prior to the shooting, both boys presented multiple psychological issues. Ralph Larkin, in his book, Comprehending Columbine, says a year before the shooting, Eric Harris threatened a student named Brooks on a personal website. On this website, Eric threatened Brooks by saying that he would rig up explosives to kill him. He goes on by saying, "I don't care if I live or die in the shootout. All I want to do is kill and injure as many of you pricks as I can." Disturbed with this information, Brooks brings it up with his parents. His parents decide to take this information to the local sheriff's department. The sheriff's department started to prepare a search warrant for Eric's home. But then, according to Lori Collier-Hillstrom in her novel, School Shootings and the Never Again Movement, instead of getting the warrant, police reported the website to the school. And the school believed this was just a prank and blew it off as such. Lori Collier-Hillstrom also mentioned that just 2 months prior to the shooting, the second shooter, Dylan Klebold, wrote an essay in English class. The essay for English class was written about a school shooting and the perspective of the gunman. The essay had very disturbing notes and details, and this disturbed the teacher. The teacher decided to bring this information up with both Dylan's parents and the school counselor. Yet, both the school counselor and Dylan's parents felt it was just the imagination of a teenage boy and decided to blow it off as well. At this time, I would also like to mention that after the shooting, investigators found a very detailed diary in Eric's home. In the diary, Eric had multiple hate messages for multiple students that he was targeting. In his house, in his bedroom, investigators also found multiple rounds of ammunition, as well as a blueprint of the school. If only Eric's parents had entered his room before April 20th, 1999, this pain and suffering could have been prevented. We now know that teachers, parents, students, and police could have done a better job at preventing this event. Let's talk about what happened on April 20th, 1999. Around 11 o'clock, Dylan Klebold and Eric Harris entered the school and planted bombs in the cafeteria. Ralph Larkin, in his book, Comprehending Columbine, said that the boys initially planted bombs in the school cafeteria, specifically under the seats of athletes and popular kids, as these were their prime targets. Ralph Larkin continues by saying that the boys planted the bombs to go off at 11:17 in the morning. By 11:19, when the bombs did not go off, the two boys entered the school and opened fire. Most kids that Tuesday were just wondering what was for lunch. Others were studying in the library. That's when Dylan Klebold and Eric Harris came into the school with semi-automatic handguns, shotguns, and rifles. They killed 12 students, 1 teacher, and injured 20 other students. Michelle Mark, in her online article for Insider, How Columbine Changed American Schools Forever, remarks that the way law enforcement responded to this event shows the country's lack of preparation. By this she meant that the school shooting was only 16 minutes, but it took law enforcement 4 hours to enter the school. 1 bleeding to death. This was a side students made in an upper classroom on the second story. The one bleeding to death was Dave Saunders. Dave Saunders was a teacher at Columbine High School. He was shot saving 100 kids and helping them escape the cafeteria. Dave Saunders was shot in the head, neck, and torso, but he managed to escape to an upper story classroom. He waited 3.5 hours before he bled to death. His last words were, "Tell my family I love them." Columbine shooting was the first big school shooting in America. Emily Shapiro wrote a story 20 years after Columbine, What's Changed and What Hasn't, for schools in America for ABC News. She mentions that if law enforcement prepared better, this could have been prevented. Why was the protocol to wait? Michelle Mark, in her online article for Insider, says that 10 out of 13 students died in the library. She believes that if law enforcement had gone into the school immediately, those 10 lives could have been saved. But instead, they waited 4 hours. And after 4 hours, the law enforcement entered the school and discovered 12 students dead, 1 teacher dead, 20 students injured, and the killers dead through suicide. It is now 2021. Law enforcement knows better, parents know better, and teachers are better equipped to handle these situations. Let's see how. Michelle Mark, in her online article, says that police are now trained to go into the school and stop gunfire immediately. This is known as active shooting. In active shooting, police go into the school and stop the shooters at any means necessary. Glenn Mushert, in his article, Responding to School Violence, Confronting the Columbine Effect, states that after Columbine, schools across the country now have more security. These security measures include security cameras, metal detectors, school ID, and in some cases, key cards to get into the building. Other things schools have enforced, according to Glenn Mushert, is that if students mention any type of violence or bring into weapons, they will receive an automatic suspension or expulsion, which was not the case in April of 1999. Emily Shapiro, in her article, 20 years after Columbine, What's Changed and What Hasn't, also brings to light that active shooter drills have changed since the 2000s. Now, active shooter drills are known as ALICE. Currently, I work at a school where every year we have to do ALICE training. ALICE stands for Alert, Lockdown, Inform, Counter, and Evacuate. Alert means as soon as you know that there is an active shooter on campus, alert 911. L, lock down the building. This means lock down the building as well as create boundaries and barricades in the classroom that you're in. I, inform. Keep police updated on where you believe the shooter is and how many people in your classroom. C, counter. Prepare for the worst. Get ready to scream, throw, hit, and defend yourself from the gunman at any means necessary. E, evacuate. Worst comes to worst, jump out of the 2-story window. You will survive a broken leg, but you will not survive a gunshot wound. 16 minutes. That's all it took. In 16 minutes, Rachel Scott, Dan Roberg, Dave Saunders, Stephen Cornell, Kyle Vasquez, Cassie Burnell, Matthew Ketchert, Isaiah Scholes, Lauren Townsend, John Tomlin, Kelly Fleming, Daniel Mauser, Corey DePuter, and ultimately Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold lost their lives in that school. 16 minutes is all it took. 15 families no longer are whole, and the nation as a whole knows better. Schools are now better equipped to handle and stop violence. We need to keep another tragedy like this from happening.